The final hours of Ben Ritchie, Indiana's most feared inmate, faces the end. Hello, friends. Tonight, we take you inside the last 24 hours of a man whose choices turned a small Indiana town into the center of a tragedy that still echoes today. His name was Benjamin Donnie Ritchie. To some, he was a young man shaped by hardship and chaos. To others, he became the face of unforgivable violence when a stolen van, a foot chase, and a sudden decision took the life of a police officer. For nearly 23 years, Ritchie lived behind steel and concrete, fighting appeals, finding unexpected companionship, and facing a sentence that never loosened its grip. But on May 20th, 25, all of that came to an end. From his final meal at Olive Garden to his last quiet words. We'll walk with him step by step until the lights went out. Stay with me, and if you haven't yet, subscribe now so you won't miss the next chapter in our prison documentary series. Dear friends, on May 20th, 2025, the quiet corridors of Indiana State Prison became the stage for the final chapter of a man's troubled story. For nearly 23 years, Benjamin Donnie Ritchie had lived behind those walls, his name tied to one of Indiana's most painful headlines, the shooting death of a police officer, William Bill Toney, in 2000. That night, a stolen van, a frantic chase, and a single decision turned a young man's fear into irreversible tragedy. But what does a man do with 2 decades of waiting? And how does he face the final 24 hours when the countdown cannot be stopped? Let's walk through Benjamin's last day, moment by moment, and see what brought him here. Benjamin's final morning began like any other day on death row until a quiet knock signaled the difference. At dawn, the fluorescent lights snapped on and an officer delivered the official word, no more appeals, no more stays. The state was ready. He had lived in a cell barely larger than a parking space, a narrow bed against one wall, a metal toilet and sink against the other, and a small shelf where personal letters and a Bible rested. Beside these sat an odd companion, a prison-approved cat, part of a program meant to calm inmates. For years, that cat had been one of the few living things to share Benjamin's space. On this day, even it seemed to sense the shift. Prison staff noted his composure. He wasn't combative or withdrawn. Instead, he spent the morning writing. It's believed those letters were to family and to a woman named Ivana, a supporter from overseas who had befriended him through years of correspondence. He didn't speak of appeals anymore. He had already told courts, "I am not the same man I was at 20." But the law had closed every door. To understand those hours, you have to know the man behind the headlines. Born May 3rd, 1980, Benjamin's childhood was steeped in instability. His mother, Marion Martin, struggled with addiction. His father was absent. By the time Benjamin was 10, he had been hospitalized for psychiatric care, diagnosed with bipolar disorder and behavioral issues. School was a revolving door. He dropped out in 9th grade, slipped into petty crime, and was serving time for burglary before his 20th birthday. Friends would later say that he was smart, but restless, shaped by neglect and anger. And yet, nothing prepared anyone for what happened on September 29, 2000. That night, police were looking for a stolen van. When officers found it and gave chase, the crash that followed scattered 3 young men into the dark. Officer Bill Toney ran after one Benjamin. In a backyard, a fence, a pause, and 5 shots changed everything. Officer Toney, just shy of his 32nd birthday, was hit above his vest. His wife and daughters would never see him again. Benjamin said it was panic. The jury saw it as choice. His tattoo, a bold 37. Officer Toney's badge number sealed the impression of pride. In August 2001, he was sentenced to die. Life on Indiana's death row is slow, silent, and heavy. For Benjamin, the years were marked by appeals, denials, and small human connections. He found unexpected comfort in letters from Ivana, who traveled from Sweden to visit him. For a time, it gave him purpose. But every petition for clemency failed. Prison staff said he mellowed over the years. He cared for his cat. He kept journals. But the crime never went away, and neither did the loss felt by Officer Toney's family. At each hearing, his name reopened wounds. By 2025, Benjamin had exhausted every legal option. Indiana, unlike Texas, still allows a special meal. When asked, Benjamin didn't request something exotic or symbolic. Instead, he chose comfort food, a tour of Italy platter from Olive Garden chicken parmesan, lasagna, and fettuccine. Alfredo. It was familiar, warm, and simple. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he ate quietly in his cell. Prison staff noted that he ate most of it, but not all. Perhaps too restless for a full appetite. Some say he paused before each bite, as if listening to the ticking clock. As evening came, the prison shifted into high gear. Visitors were allowed in behind glass. A few family members came, some silent, some emotional. Benjamin placed his hand against the glass for a long moment. He thanked them for standing by him. At 11 o'clock in the evening, he met briefly with a spiritual advisor. He did not request a priest or pastor to stand in the chamber. Instead, they prayed quietly in the holding cell. No reporters, no drama. Just a man who had once mocked courtrooms now speaking softly of regret. Minutes before midnight, the call came. The Supreme Court had refused to intervene. The time was set. At 12:20 in the morning, May 20th. Guards came for him. Shackles clicked. He nodded once to staff he had known for years. The walk from cell to chamber is short, but those steps are long. The execution room was bright, sterile, and still. He was placed on the gurney, straps across his arms, chest, and legs. Witnesses filed in quietly, prison officials, legal observers, a few family members. There was no visible hostility, only a heavy silence. The warden asked the question. "Do you have any last words?" Benjamin's voice was calm, even. "I love my family and friends. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I hope everyone finds peace." At 12:40 in the morning, the IV lines were checked. Moments later, the lethal chemicals flowed. Benjamin closed his eyes. His chest rose, fell, slowed. At 12:46 in the morning, the doctor pronounced him dead, outside the prison. The air was still. Reporters waited with their notes. Some called it justice, others a tragedy repeated. Officer Tony's widow had once said, "Nothing brings him back, but maybe this brings peace." For Benjamin Ritchie, a boy who started life with chaos and ended it in steel and glass, the final chapter was quiet. No anger, no spectacle, just a meal, a few words, and a last breath. Dear friends, whether you believe in justice or redemption, these stories ask the same question. What do we do when a life, once broken, collides with a moment that can never be undone? As the clock struck 12:46 in the morning, the state of Indiana closed the book on Benjamin Donnie Ritchie's story, a boy who grew up amid chaos, a man who made irreversible choices, and a prisoner who spent nearly half his life behind bars, all ending in one quiet moment. No crowds, no chaos, just the steady hum of machines and a flat line on a monitor. Officer William Bill Tony's family, who carried their grief for 20 years, now faced a silence of a different kind. Dear friends, these stories always leave more questions than answers. Was this justice fulfilled, or a cycle of loss repeated? Behind every headline is a mother who cried, a widow who prayed, children who grew up without a father, and tonight, a man who once ran through dark backyards ran out of time. If you want more deep dives into real prison documentary stories, subscribe and stay with us.